Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Tiff Talks Tech. Today, I am joined by Stephanie Anderson, who's the Senior Director of Communication and Social Media at Grace Hill. And today, we're going to be talking about leveraging training technology to build culture and retain talent. So, before we really dive in, Stephanie, can you just share a little bit about you and what you do in your background?
Sure. So, my name is Stephanie Anderson. I work for Grace Hill. I'm the Senior Director of Communications and Social Media. I have been with Grace Hill for 4 years now, but I've been serving the rental housing industry for a little over 18 years now. So, I am thrilled to be here today to have a conversation about a topic we're very passionate about at Grace Hill.
Yeah, absolutely. I know we've talked about this, but in my past life when I worked on the property management side, I was a Grace Hill super user and I loved it. I just saw so much value in it when it came to the training aspect. So, I'm kind of a fan.
I love it. I love it. I too was a fan as well many, many years ago. I've actually only used Grace Hill throughout my entire career since 2006. So I'm right there with you.
Yeah, yeah. I used to love like making the trainings in the platform too whenever we needed it. And yeah, it's a great
Oh, you would
platform.
totally geek out now because
Yeah.
all the new enhancements that have happened over the years and all the new technology and the new products we have,
I
it's
know. It's been a good, like, 4 or 5 years since I've used it, so I'm sure you guys have come so far even from that, for sure. So I know training, it often gets labeled as kinda just checking the compliance box, but I know it goes so much further than that. How have you seen training evolve and make a bigger impact in our industry over time?
You're right. Training has always come forth in the beginning as compliance. Let's check a box. We have to make
Yeah.
sure that we're ensuring, that everybody's doing things uniformly the way that they're supposed to do in line with regulations and laws. And that is important. There's no question there, especially as it comes to risk mitigation. You want to
Yeah.
make sure your compliance is there. But when we think about just capturing top talent and building talent within your organization, it's really critical that you're investing in training as more than compliance, an opportunity to expand the knowledge of your team members. So you're building off what they already know and getting them ready for that next step, which is so critical. I almost think about it as, that bench strength. If you're into sports at all, we're a big sports family in my house and always thinking about who's ready to play in the game next, who's going to take it to the next level, who's ready to step in. And that should always be their thought process, whether it's a sports metaphor or something else. It should always be about the people and getting them ready for their next move in their career, whether that's lateral or not.
Yeah, absolutely. So I want to talk about kind of engaging them in that. How does the way that it's delivered really affect how those teams engage with the content itself? And are there methods that work better than others?
There's not a one size that fits all. So I want to
Yeah,
say that because that is really key to finding what's going to work for your teams.
yeah,
One of the things that we know, just learners and how they're developing, and especially the newer generations coming into the workforce, is that they lose interest very, very quickly. They need to
yeah.
be engaged. They need to be engaged quickly. They need to, capture the attention and then retain it by giving them information that seems, relatable to them. And delivering methods there are going to be really key. And I think some of the best companies that do training out there will really tell you that they do it in, two and three folds. So it's not just one delivery method, but it's a combination of delivering in-person training, doing one-on-one peer mentorship type training, and then of course, online training, being able to access all of your team in one place, not just for the compliance aspect, but allowing them to, if you remember, we always called it back in the day the backpack, building your backpack in Grace Hill and being able to add courses as you want to so that you are dictating what that learning path is just as much as your company is.
Yeah. How do people keep it fresh when it comes to engaging with their teams, just so that their teams don't see it as just another busy work thing for them to do, and they're actually wanting to engage in those trainings?
It starts from the culture of the organization. When you have top leaders in your organization that are very focused on what happens if you don't train, meaning you're not getting your bonuses, you can't stay employed here anymore. Everything is very negative connotation. That's the first problem. The other challenge that we have with that is making sure that leaders are letting them know that it's an investment in their team. It's not just about checking those boxes, but letting them know that they're investing in people because they want you to stay and they want you to be able to see a future with their organization. And that starts with the language that they use, how often they're pushing the training, and just really creating that inclusive environment that says, hey, we're all about learning. And that means the leaders need to take the training too, because I know that's
Yeah.
hard, the more senior leadership you get, but you're really setting the tone for those employees at your organization to see that you find it important and then your actions show that as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I know you said the word culture, and I know it can be a kind of a buzzword in our
It
industry,
is.
but it's
Yeah.
so, so important. How can our training programs really help reinforce those values and the importance of culture for the teams?
I think, really looking at the strategy. So thinking about what do you want your employees to gain from a training program and what does that training program look like? Because oftentimes when we're talking to companies, there are a lot of concerns about budgets. Can I only have $1 to invest in training or I have $1 million to invest in training? What does that look like and how do we fit that scope? Because that's important, especially, in the economics we're living in right now. How do we cut back but still have an impact and things of that nature? So I think that that's really important to think about is what your budget is and what your strategy, what your employees need to learn and what they're going to gain from it. And then it's got to be consistency. Just like if you want to eat healthy or go to the gym or be a good parent, all of those things take consistency. And so what is your organization doing to ensure that consistency? A lot of times we will see where companies only push the training like at the end of the month or specifically at
Hmm.
the end of the quarter because
Yeah.
they know that employees have to be able to check those boxes that they've done X, Y, and Z in order to get a bonus or in order to meet whatever policies are in place for that. I'm not saying that's right or wrong because that's really company specific. What I am saying though is that it can't just be that. It can't just be you're sending an email on the 29th of the month that says, you better do your training. It really has to be about, have you seen this new training? Or, oh my gosh, there's this new 45-second training that tells you about the newest IT system that we're going to implement or so, whatever the case may
Yeah.
be, but just getting them excited about new stuff. And you do have to hold them accountable. So those emails at the end of the month or a quarter are still okay. But what are you doing to fill the buckets those other, 28 days of the month?
Yeah, and the thing I always loved about Grace Hill is that I felt like the content was always fresh and I was always learning something new. Whereas there are so many programs where, like, for instance, you do have to take fair housing every year. So you think to yourself, well, I know everything about fair housing, right? Like, I do this every year.
Yeah.
But I did always feel like, okay, keeping it fresh and keeping us engaged, it was always a fun thing for me to do.
Yeah. And, I love the way that you look at it. And I think a lot of team members look at it in that sense. When you think about where fair housing was, I'll use that as an example since you brought it up. That
Yeah.
is such a long course, technically,
Uh-huh.
right? And you've got to
Yeah.
meet the state requirements, and everybody remembers taking it. But for those who have taken it, and then year over year, if you've been in any organization for a long period of time, you do want to learn something new, but you don't necessarily want to invest 3 hours in a course to do that.
Yeah.
And I love that we have things called refreshers. They're like these little micro trainings that you can do on particular topics, but they take 5 minutes or less. So it's an opportunity to still gain more knowledge in it. So you're keeping up your skill set, you're learning new things, but it's not consuming you to the time where you're trying to prioritize, your job responsibilities with learning
Right.
new information. It's a good balance there.
Yeah, exactly. In such a diverse industry like ours, how can training be used to create more inclusive environments and make it welcoming to all of the team members that we have?
It's a great question. I think when we think of being inclusive, especially with training, we have to look at that whole stop putting people in a box.
Mhm.
There are so many different types of learners out there. The past few years there's been a lot more conversations out there about neurodivergent and how they're collecting information and it's sometimes it's as simple as going back to, are you an auditory learner? Are you a visual learner? But I think you have to couple that with taking it a step further. How are people digesting information? I'll give you an example. For me personally, I get very disengaged easily. It's not because I want to, my attention span is just so short. And I do blame that on motherhood because I think that I'm used to going a million miles a minute.
Yeah.
That if you put me in a chair and say, okay, you have to sit here for an hour and a half and watch something, if we know that people are only retaining 20% of that to begin with, it's really going to be even less than that because, so I think we think about the different ways people learn. I think that we make considerations for different positions. If you're asking, let's say, a maintenance personnel to sit down at a chair for a long period of time when they're used to being up and about and working the property, that's probably not the best way to get them excited. In fact, it's probably going to create that negative connotation I spoke about earlier. So, how can you deliver the materials in a way that is engaging but also fun? And I do think that that's where your training department has to get a little bit creative. They've
Yeah.
got to think outside that box. And what's really cool is Grace Hill has so many tools for that to really help the administrators of the training programs in an organization help them think about it that way and help them deliver it in a better way.
Yes, I love that you bring that up. When I oversaw training in my past life, I had a mentor and she would always drill that into me. Like, everybody learns differently. So we
Yeah.
can't only teach one way. We can't only go to the property and teach all of our trainings. We need to provide different ways for people to learn. And I thought that was just so valuable because it really is creating a more inclusive environment for everyone to be able to do their job to the best of their abilities.
Yes, agreed.
Yeah. Do you have any kinds of examples where a company or team they use training to build a stronger team culture?
I mean, I think we're seeing that across the board at a lot of organizations, especially larger organizations, because when you're interviewing candidates for a potential job at your property management company and you're asking them sort of like, what are your non negotiables? What are your items that you want to have within a company that's going to make this role the right fit for you? Education is something that's really important to people. In fact, there are a lot of studies out there that show that flexibility in the workplace and training are two of the top things that people are looking for outside of salary. If they have a flexible environment and they're able to gain knowledge and skills that they can take with them throughout their entire career journey, it's really important to them. So I think that that's going to set the tone for the cultures when you start with the interview process to really dig in and say, this is kind of what the expectation is here. This is what you can expect at the company, and we're going to invest in you. And I think you have to really showcase what that investment looks like. Because if
Yeah.
you look at some companies and they advertise, you can go to this large conference, let's use NAA's Apartmentalize as an example, that is a huge expense. And listen, I'm not saying you can't go, but what are you then doing for maybe your entry level positions at the site level that you could not afford to send them to? How are they still getting some great content and information that they can then feel is really important to them? And I always say, the two best ways are online learning. A lot of people don't even know, but you can get the top 8 sessions from Apartmentalize at the conferences. It's recorded and you can get them and watch them, and you get CECs for those as well. But
Yeah.
also partnering with your local apartment association and letting them in their in person classes couple with that training program. So when you think about your strategy for training, it's got to be all encompassing of various factors, not just put you in front of a computer or just send you to one fair housing class, check the box, and you're done. There's a lot of different ways to keep people engaged that all kind of stay within your budget.
Yeah, absolutely. That kind of leads into what I want to talk about next, and that's retention because our industry does have really high turnover. So obviously that ongoing training, it is going to help reduce that because you are pouring into those team members and you are showing that they matter. How does training play a role in showing teams that they have that clear path for career growth and especially on more of those on-site roles like leasing agents and maintenance?
Well, for starters, we have career pathing that we already do within our systems, which is really great. It's kind of like a baseline for people of how you're going to implement it in your organization. But aside from that, you really have the ability with your training program to create really a wide plethora of career paths depending on what your company, what size it is and do you outsource some things versus have them internally and so forth? Having conversations with people, though, I think is the most important and saying, what is it that you want to do and where can you go? I wish someone would have sat me down during my first years in the business and really talk to me more about career pathing, because in my mind, kind of what's drilled, and it still is today, is that, you start at entry level like a leasing consultant and
Yeah.
you move up to assistant property manager, regional. The rest is history. And that is, climbing that corporate ladder of success. And there's nothing wrong with that. It's clearly an avenue that I took because I didn't necessarily realize that there were other avenues, but it is really cool to think about other ways that people can do things that kind of fit their skill sets. And I think taking something like Grace Hill, where they can see what training is available to them and they can break it up into segments, whether they're more interested in, let's say, the marketing or the sales or the HR and people and leadership and management, that kind of helps them determine what that trajectory will be based on what their interests are and what they're good at. And so that's another way to kind of couple that career planning and pathing with what we already have in our systems that will help them build.
Yes, I love that you say that, and kind of taking it back to my mentor that I had in my early years. She always said to me, like, "What do you want your job to look like? What is your dream job? What are the tasks that you're doing every day? And let's create that for you." So I always loved having that voice, and we would talk about it over and over because it would change over time as well. And that really kept me engaged and showed me, like, you have a future here and there's all these things that you could do. It doesn't have to be monotonous every day. So I think that's a great point, and being able to leverage the training that's available to you so that you can hone in on those skills is a game changer.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And you brought up earlier, it really sits with me here, is you were talking a lot about fresh training, because I
Mhm.
think that's the bucket that we can fall in a lot. And me as a supplier, I am constantly thinking about how can I stay educated, because I don't always
Yeah.
want to think about what happened 10, 15, 20 years ago,
Right.
because so much has changed, in our industry. So how are we making sure we stay up to date with relevant information? So if you're not using a provider of information for your learning management system that has fresh content where they can show you where it's constantly updated, and it's not just those compliance courses, but also like what trends are happening, where's the insights of the industry. If you don't have that, your people are really thirsty for that information. And what's going to happen? They're going to go out on their own and grasp that information, whether that's
Yeah.
free webinars from other companies, whether it's interviewing for jobs with other organizations, because again, they're really thirsty for it. And if they feel like you're holding them back and you're not giving that to them, that then becomes a not so great moment,
Yeah.
for that relationship between the company and the employee. And it's hard to stay up to date on content. Our content team works so hard around the clock to ensure that everything is updated, everything from that regulatory and compliance standpoint to also, because HOTMA, right? We're hearing about HOTMA all the time, and making sure that's staying up to date, and human trafficking and fair housing and lawsuits and ICE visiting properties concerning immigration. These are all
Right.
big, big concerns. But also, are we talking about everything from virtual tours, how we're using video in our sales and marketing? How are we handling our online reputation in our social media? You got to have content on all of these things.
Yeah.
So it's important to make sure that it's really relevant content and not just a list of 60 courses that would be great for maybe a beginner, but not when you're trying to really hone in on your top talent and build.
Yes, exactly. How has technology really changed the way that that training is delivered to teams? And are there tools or features that have really made a huge difference in that as well?
Obviously, AI is a big thing,
Yeah.
and I think everybody's using AI and chatbots to some sort of extent in some form or fashion. If they're not, I'm sure their employees are using, like, ChatGPT, right, the free version.
Right.
But, I think about what we're doing at Grace Hill a lot, and I mentioned to you earlier, if you would probably geek out if you thought about all the new things in technology that we've been afforded, because it's amazing to see how far it can take you when you have the right technology platform out there. Performance HQ is a great example of that. That is our newest baby, as I will say, and that gives you kind of a 360 look of what's happening at each of your site levels.
Hmm.
If you have multiple products with us, you take that training and you couple it with mystery shopping and seeing the
Yeah.
results of that to know which training benefits. Then you look at surveys. What are your residents and employees saying? What feedback are you giving? And how does that tie into everything? And then how does that tie into maintenance and work orders? And, the list goes on. You tie reputation management. What are people saying on the internet about you that may or may not even live in your community? You
Right.
couple all that together and it really helps give you this holistic report that helps know what's happening at your site level in order for you to make meaningful decisions for changes for that. So I think technology in that sense is really cool. Another thing that we have is Gracie. And Gracie is our chat bot who's AI. And what's really great about her is that you ask her about any particular policy, procedure, training, and she points you exactly where it is. So when you think about your site team levels who are super busy and
Ah.
Miss Smith comes in to give notice, and there's something very particular about the notice that she's putting in to leave. And your employee is kind of frozen, like, oh, I can't remember. We just changed that policy recently. I can't remember. You literally type it in and it pops up immediately. So they're not searching. They're not going to a search bar. They're not looking for all this stuff. But Gracie tells them exactly where to find it and what information. It kind of summarizes what they need so that they can give the resident an immediate response because that's what residents want. They want that immediate gratification of what they need. And then you can go back and then review more of the policy or the training or whatever else is necessary based on the information that Gracie gave. So I think that's another way of technology just working smarter and not harder for us.
Yeah, I feel like that's something that people in the industry have wanted for a while, and being able
Yeah.
to just have it at their fingertips and not have to go digging around for the information they need. That's really cool.
I mean, when you think about how smart AI is,
Yeah.
I mean, it's kind of amazing and scary all wrapped up into one.
Right, I know. But I think overall, like, when we use it for good, this is the amazing stuff that can come out of that.
Yes.
Is there any kind of automation that plays into your guys' system and really helps simplify the training process for on-site teams as well?
I think yes. Ultimately within our systems, we make it so it takes work off of the administrator of that. And sometimes that's going to be more of like an admin person in the company, but oftentimes it falls on the training and development department. So
Yeah.
to be able to have automation, integration with your HR system so that when your employee is exiting, it moves them out of the system. And that means that they don't have any more pending courses and their record is all synced up, of what they've done within that organization. Same with new employees, knowing that automation is there of what classes that they need to take without having to manually add them in. Because again, if you
Yeah.
were just managing a couple of properties, it probably wouldn't be a heavy lift. It would still be working, less smart. But when you talk about these large corporations where we're saying, 100 plus employees could be starting on any given day, to think about the administrative work behind that is insane. So you're
Yeah.
really overcoming the challenge of having an admin person to have to worry about all of that, which saves the company money that you can then invest that money in other things.
Yeah, no, I think back when I used the system, that automation wasn't even in place, and I remember getting Workday notification that we had a new employee, and I had to go set up their Grace Hill account,
Yes.
and that's really cool that technology is just continuing to evolve like that so that it's easier for everybody.
It is. And it makes me excited for the future. I mean, if we're in
Yeah,
2025 and this type of technology is here, I can only imagine what the next few years to come are really going to look like. You hear a lot of people joke about like robots and stuff. I don't think
yeah,
robots are ever going to take over our jobs, but it is really cool to think about the mediocre things that we have to do, like the mundane day to day stuff that ties us down from really doing one, impactful work, but two, things that bring us joy. Because I don't know about you, but I would say I could probably count on less than one hand how many people say, I love to fill out spreadsheets all day, or I
right.
love to do manual reporting all day. Yes, there are some people out there like that do it, but it's not common, and especially not in our industry because we're very people focused and experience focused. So thinking about what that technology is going to go and how it's really going to help impact the people of property management is really cool.
Yeah, absolutely. I think back to when I worked on that side of things, and every time we had a struggling property, we had to go through a full marketing audit and see, like, what are they doing? Are they getting online reviews? Are they, I don't know, all the different things. And I remember it would pretty much always come back to either a training thing, like they haven't done their trainings or they hadn't really been engaged. And I feel like the way that technology is going makes it so much easier to identify the gaps. And like you're saying, you can take that holistic approach of like, what are the surveys saying and summarize it so much easier than back when I was doing it. I was going through and like looking one by one at the reviews, and now we have systems that can do that for us. So I think that's
Yes.
pretty miraculous.
It's really great because now you're leading with data and that's how you're making decisions versus kind of pulling straws. Because oftentimes, like you say, we're looking at, okay, let's pull this out. And when that doesn't work, okay, it's
Right.
got to be this. So at that point, we're just going down the list to figure out what it is. And that's very time consuming.
Right.
And then it can be extremely stressful for the employee who's trying to get the resources that they need or may not even know that they need in order to better their performance.
Exactly. I want to think about, are there any innovative uses of technology like gamification? And I know you mentioned AI that you think we need to embrace even more, especially within the industry as a whole.
For sure. I've said this for years. Gamification is where it's at. At the
Yeah.
end of the day, I think we're going to see more people thirsty for it than ever because gamification is huge with the younger generations. And as we see these newer generations coming into the workforce, they want that friendly competition. They want to be able to have goals that show them that instant gratification, whether that's a leaderboard where you're kind of keeping score on a weekly, monthly basis, even quarterly, whether it's giving out awards. Again, people want to feel like they're a part of something more than just what they're doing. And I think awards are also a great way of giving them that gratification of the impact that they are making. Because, oftentimes we think, we're just leasing apartments,
Yeah.
but the impact is there. It's so much higher. And, being able to do gamification that shows them that is really exciting. And whatever that looks like, obviously technology is great for gamification. But if that means your budget says you can just go back to the bulletin boards, right, of where you're keeping or a dry erase board of who's leased what apartments or how much money maintenance has saved on turnovers or how many renewals you've increased, whatever the case may be, do that. Having visuals for people are strong in addition to that audio or just telling them that, hey, we have this contest going on and this is what we're going to do because people are motivated by different things. That also points out you should be asking your employees what motivates you. Is it the gratification and the awards? Is it money or monetary gifts? Whatever that is, you should do more of that for sure to get better results. But I think that the technology gives us a better idea of gamification and how it's being used. We just rolled out recently new awards within our platform. Again, we've always done gamification in awards, but
Yeah.
you got to kind of level up your game every time because there's new stuff coming out and people want new. It becomes kind of
Yeah.
stagnant if you log into your system and you see the same thing every time.
Right. Like,
You
think
don't want
about
that.
Duolingo. Like, I use that every day because I am excited. I wanna get my streak, and I wanna show that
Yeah.
I've done, like, 500 days in a row, and that content, it's different every day too.
Yeah.
So, thinking about the way that I wanna learn on just for fun, of course, people are
Yes.
going to want that in the workplace as well.
And when you make it fun, it makes it exciting to come to work.
Yeah.
When you can have contests that, yes, you're still getting to the goal, whether that goal is NOI or it's leasing apartments or whatever the case may be, you're also getting them to engage in something that makes them feel like they're having fun. And, happy employees create happy residents, and that creates happy revenue for your owners. So it just works. And sometimes people are like, but that just seems so simple. But it
Yeah.
really is that simple when you build it out and you have an effective strategy for it.
Yes, exactly. So, I know a lot of people say our industry, we can run a little bit behind the times.
Mhm.
For companies who may be hesitant to adopt those new training technologies, where do you suggest they start to see the biggest impact?
I think that the companies that are not embracing things like AI are definitely getting left behind.
Yeah.
There's no question there. I think it is scary for your employees and for companies. And I know that there's risk liability there, but I think that you talk to your attorney, move past that. Anytime we're doing change, It's scary, it's uncomfortable, it's
Yeah.
nerve-wracking. That's anything in life, but know that you're not alone with that. And technology, I think you have to do a couple things with it. I think that outside of the budgetary concerns, because you're gonna have to find a platform that works for what you can naturally afford. But aside from that, just think about technology and what you wanna get from it. What are the things that you need to do better in your company? And then let your employees dictate some things to you. Because I think one of the other
Mm,
things that companies make a big mistake is they have high level positions that make decisions, which I get that, but they don't get the buy in from those, let's say, in the site level positions
yeah.
first. So
Mhm.
if you're rolling out any type of new platform, it's a great opportunity to engage with them and say, this is what we're thinking about doing. Tell us what makes you nervous about it and tell us what you're excited about and what you would want to see from it. And then see if you can kind of mesh all that together so that it makes sense with your technology provider. I think that that's big. I think you have to try new things too. I think that, to be scared and to fall and fail is tough, but that's the only way that you're going to learn. And you'll see, a lot of organizations that have done it successfully don't necessarily roll out something to their entire portfolio at once. Maybe they have some
Yeah.
test properties that they roll things out on, and so that they can get results and see what works and what doesn't work before rolling it out to everybody. But, when the pandemic happened and we started getting back to what we would say kind of normalcy in the real world, it was interesting how many companies had rolled out so much technology overnight because they didn't know what they were doing. None of us did
Yep.
really. And they're rolling it out, and all the employees became burnt out and they became numb to
Yeah.
anything new that was coming out because they're like, well, is this going to stick around or not?
Right.
And I'm overwhelmed. I don't have the time to learn new technology. And then when you're thinking about the workforce that has been in the industry the longest, that has the longest adaptation rate to these new technologies, you are just pushing them out the door. You're not working with them and working together to embrace like these technology solutions. So it's not easy. I know sometimes when we have these conversations, it makes it sound like it's just a flip of a switch and everything's grand, but it definitely takes a lot of conversations. And if you can get employees to buy in who will be executing, that's going to be really key for the success.
Yes, no, I think that's a great point, and, I think that a lot of training roles, it takes you getting outside of yourself and, like, what you think is gonna be the best, and getting out of your own perspective, and like you were
Yeah.
saying, get the feedback of everybody else involved because they might have some amazing suggestions for you that will make them they might even be super small and easy, and that'll get them to buy into it.
Yeah, it's true. And I think about other industries because you were talking about how we're slower to adapt to
Yeah,
technology at times. I think part of that is we have smaller profit margins, but I also think that a lot of it comes from the scaredness to try new things and the realization that you could hurt your business if things don't work out. When I think about some of the technology that's newer now, where you can take training on your iPad, your phone, right? I mean, we're in the world of TikTok where you can
yeah,
learn anything about a topic in 60 seconds or less and be dangerous with that knowledge. You're really, employees have just at the tip of their fingers all of this knowledge. So, how are you making sure that it gets to them in a way that one, it's correct because, just because you read it online doesn't mean it's accurate. And
right,
people, constantly don't question it, they don't fact check it.
right.
And then also, don't you want them doing it a particular way within your organization to follow your policies and procedures? So if you're not like corralling that and organizing it, which technology makes it so easy to do that, then you really are setting yourself up for failure in terms of consistency of that information they're getting.
Yeah, absolutely. So, kind of thinking about our industry as a whole, is there an area of training that you see that you think our industry needs to be more focused on?
Interesting question. I think that reputation management is something that is a big
Mm,
deal right
yeah,
now. I think that, censorship has been a big topic, right, post election.
yeah,
And just knowing that there are so many people in the world that can get on any platform they want and they can say whatever they want about your
right.
people, your product, everything. So, making sure that you have training and your employees have training on it, you would be surprised with how many people either one, don't respond to reviews or information that they see, or two, don't do anything with the information. So,
Yeah.
if you see a Reddit thread or something on Facebook and it's like a friend of a friend of a friend, right? Because you know how you fall down that rabbit hole, and they're posting about the property or the company that you work for, and you read it and you might screenshot it to a coworker or a friend, but then you don't really do anything. There's nothing actionable you do at that point.
Yeah.
There just needs to be more training about what to do with that information because otherwise it does just doesn't help. And I think that people take things very, very personally.
Yeah.
I think it's hard not to. So when you see a review and it mentions your name or your property or something that you're very passionate about, it's hard to not respond and say, "You suck. You didn't pay your rent. Like, what are you talking about?"
Yeah.
And that's not the right answer to that. So I think that's one thing. The other thing I'm kind of shocked about with training and policies would kind of fall into this as well. I don't see it talked about enough in terms of employees and recording things like TikToks during the
Mm,
workday or residents recording employees when they come into the office or on a tour. Like, how are you handling that? Do your employees feel comfortable? How are you being consistent with that as it pertains to fair housing? Like, you just don't hear that a lot. But yet, when I'm on
yeah.
TikTok scrolling, I'm constantly seeing conversations, whether it's at a doctor's office or an apartment community, and customers and residents alike are talking, and maybe they're not on there, but the situation is there and how it's playing out in the employees. And I think about the lawsuits that can come from it from either side. And how are you training your people to handle those situations? Because you know as well as I do, everywhere you go nowadays, somebody has their cell phone in somebody's face.
Yeah.
Recording something, and I'm kind of guilty of that too, at least as it pertains to like my kids' sports events, right? Like I
Right.
can't miss
Right.
a
Right.
moment. I got to get it on camera. But there's so many people out there that are doing that constantly, and I don't think that our employees really know how to handle it.
Yeah.
And, they don't know what they don't know. So how are you setting them up for success in those types of situations?
That's such a great point. Yeah, I think that's a really good call out for sure. So, for anybody who wants to learn more about using technology for training and getting connected with you as well, where can they find you and where can they learn more about this as a topic?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I would love to invite you to check out Grace Hill. And if you just rolled your eyes when I said that, that's okay because you probably haven't seen Grace Hill in the last, 6+ months or more. Because I'll tell you, in the last few years alone, Grace Hill technology has really elevated and the cool
Yeah.
things that we're doing. And I'll talk to people sometimes and they will say, "Oh, you're just the LMS." I'm like, "What? We
No.
haven't been just an LMS in a decade, because we have so many other things and we keep purchasing companies so that we can elevate our suite of products. And I think that that's a really cool thing. And
Yeah.
I would love to share more information about that. Of course, you can go to Grace Hill's website, gracehill.com, and you'll find so much information. We have tremendous case studies on there. And I know you questioned earlier, like what companies are doing this and where it make an impact.
Yeah.
You can get all the data on there. The other thing, check out our social media. We're talking about trends on Grace Hill. We're talking about information that's happening. We do several free webinars a month that we invite you to that you can learn so much information. And we don't sit there and try to sell you on the stuff. We know that we have valuable information and products.
Yeah.
It's really about sharing that information with the world. And so I encourage you to do those types of things. And I think those are the quickest ways. Aside from that, if you're also looking for another resource outside of Grace Hill that you're thinking about, well, we already use Grace Hill, or we are looking to expand what we're already doing with our training program. Brent Williams has a trainers roundtable within multifamily insiders.
Mm,
And I'm not eligible to attend. Suppliers don't attend that. It's literally on the owner operator side and their trainer specifically. So they share a lot of information in that private group about what you're doing, what works, what doesn't work, like all the juice and
that's
stuff.
really
Because,
cool.
if we work together, it makes way more sense than
Yeah.
let's not try to do the same things that everybody else has done if we know for sure they're not going to work. Let others give you that feedback and then you can determine if it's worth the risk for you to try or not. But I think that that's another excellent group that has a lot of good information sharing.
Yes, no, that is great. I'm geeking out and I wish that I was still doing training because all these things would have been so useful to me back when I was doing it. And I'll throw in a
Yeah.
plug for Grace Hill too, because like I said, I loved using the product back before it was even elevated because there was just so many great capabilities with it. And I can't imagine now that you guys have added so much to it, it's probably just on the next level too.
It is. It's so user friendly too. So it's easy to use. People love it. And the new trainings that we've been releasing are so cool. I mentioned it earlier about like learning something in 60 seconds or less and being
Yeah,
dangerous with that information. Knowing that our site teams are the number one people that need to capture information and training the
yeah,
most, but they need it the quickest. And our content is so short now. These micro we're calling them something different, but essentially think of them as like Instagram reels, where you can look at stuff
right.
and we have real people in them, but we also still do some of the cartoons, if you remember that too, because
Yeah,
again,
yeah,
everybody doesn't learn the same. So
right,
it's all about getting that information in front of people so that they can, just engage with it and retain it, right? That's key,
right.
retaining that information in whatever way that looks like for them.
Right, and I think about, like, my foster kids are 5 and 7, and they love being on an iPad to watch whatever, and I don't understand it. I think about, like, "Why don't you just watch it on the TV? You're gonna watch the same thing on the iPad as the TV, but you want the iPad." But I think it's because that it's more interactive for them,
It is.
and it's in their face, and that they're, like, right there, and they want the shorts. They wanna watch YouTube Shorts and whatever,
Yeah.
and I think that's where learning is going a lot more these days. It's just shorter, easier for people to understand. And so I think the fact that Grace Hill is watching those trends in learning and watching what people are doing, I think that makes such a big difference. Yeah, I think that's great information. And just the last question I want to ask. This is a fun bonus question that I ask every single one of my guests. But is there a tech tool that you are loving right now? And it doesn't have to be related to this topic at all, but it can be.
Okay, there is a lot right now that I'm loving. We just went through a 4-week intense training within Grace Hill, which was all geared towards AI. And we
Yeah.
hired a third party company to come in and train all of our people and say, looking at your position, what could you do differently? What could AI help support with it? And then going through all of the different programs. So immediately, I am obsessed with Gemini right now. We rolled out
Yeah.
Gemini in our company, and I love that. Chat GPT is something that we were already using. The
Yeah.
other one that I have used for a while now, and I swear by it, is called AnyWord. It's
Mm.
for those of us who are in the content world, meaning that we do a lot of writing, whether
Yeah.
that's writing for social, writing blogs, writing any type of content.
Yeah.
It helps to redefine what that content looks like when it comes out. Because, for instance, I'll give you an example. I constantly have all these great ideas in my head, and
Yeah.
sometimes I'll talk about them out loud and I'll get a strange look from someone. And it's because it takes me a minute to get to where they have the aha moment. So,
Mm.
having someone kind of help you with that, this technology per se, get to the point exactly how you want to get to it. And you can put in like your personas, who you're thinking your targeted audience is, how your
That's
language
cool.
is, all of those things. And then
Yeah.
it helps you with things like writer's block or so you're putting in all the information. So it to me, it is still different from Chat GPT or any of those because they're still asking for the meat and potatoes within any word. You're still putting down what it is that you want. You're not just saying, hey, search about this topic. You're putting all the information, but it's helping you to build it out in a way based on whatever resource you're trying to create that is going to
Mm.
make it so it's retainable to people or that it's an easy read or so forth. So, anyways, it's a great tool that my
That's
colleague
really
recommended
cool.
a year ago, and I love it.
I'm
Obsessed.
gonna have to go find that for my job. So that's amazing. I love it. Awesome. Well, thank you so much for joining me. I think this has been a great
Thanks for
conversation.
having
I'm
me.
excited for everyone to tune in. Where can people connect with you?
The best way is obviously online, LinkedIn, Stephanie Anderson. I would love to connect with you. Let me know about what you thought about today's episode. And then if you have any questions or just want to geek out about some things with technology, training, the apartment industry, anything, I'm totally
Yeah.
game for that. And then, of course, you can find me on all the major platforms: Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, X. I'm on all of them. So I would
Love it.
love to hear from you.
Awesome. Well, thank you everyone for tuning in and tune in next week for another episode.